Danger. These 10 foods fuel cancer cell growth, especially for diabetics. Have you ever wondered if certain foods you eat are silently creating an internal environment where cancer cells thrive? What if I told you that this isn't science fiction? It's a dangerous reality. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that affects millions but is rarely talked about. 10 terrible foods that feed cancer cells. These are especially dangerous for diabetics. Certain dietary patterns and several specific food categories contain compounds and nutritional properties that have been proven to limit the body's ability to fight cancer cell growth. Some of these foods even supply the exact nutrients that cancer cells love to eat. And wouldn't you know it, all of these foods are also linked to a range of diabetes symptoms, including chronic inflammation, elevated blood sugar levels, and increased insulin resistance. And that is like pouring gasoline onto a burning cancer fire. How? Well, we're revealing the worst cancer offenders hiding in plain sight on your plate, beginning with the most obvious culprit: sugar-filled drinks, the liquid cancer fuel. Sodas, sweet teas, energy drinks, and especially those glucose-spiking frappuccinos. These sugar bombs are considered the worst beverages for diabetics because they not only flood your system with sugar, they force your pancreas to release extra insulin. And that's exactly why they may also feed cancer. According to Dr. Jason Fung, author of the Diabetes Code, excessive insulin is one of the most powerful growth factors for cancer cells. In fact, it's like Miracle-Gro for tumors. Insulin is an anabolic hormone, meaning it helps your body to rebuild and repair tissues. It does this by stimulating cell growth and division, but this also means that insulin can help cancerous tumor cells grow and divide. I'll tell you more about why your insulin can make or break cancer cells later in this video. But let's take a look at another major way sugary drinks can heighten your cancer risk. Their high sugar and the large insulin jolt you receive from that sugar will increase your chronic inflammation levels. This can lead to something called angiogenesis. I'll tell you what that is, and how this too can help cancer cells grow in your body later in this video, so keep watching. Chronic inflammation from consuming too much liquid sugar can also suppress your immune response, further providing conditions where cancer cells may thrive. Have you heard of the Warburg effect? I'll show you why this bodily process is linked to both diabetes and cancer later in this video. Next, let's investigate refined carbohydrates, the sneaky sugar. Yes, your typical white breads, pastas, crackers, and pastries may not taste overly sweet, but they will load your bloodstream with sugar nonetheless. In fact, researchers have found that refined carbs spike post-meal glucose and insulin levels almost as much as soda. The impact? Tumors get immediate access to their favorite source of fuel. This encourages faster tumor growth, and it gives the tumor a heightened resistance to medical treatments. It also increases the risk of metastasis, or a secondary malignant growth at a distance from the primary site of cancer. But like sugary drinks, a main cancer risk comes not as much from the sugar itself, but from your body's insulin response to that sugar. If your bloodstream is filled with excess insulin, it will lead to a reduction in IGF-binding proteins. This has the effect of promoting cancer cell buildup and tumor growth, while also damaging your body's apoptosis, or the automated process of cancer cell death. All told, refined carbs are strongly associated with weight gain, visceral fat accumulation, and insulin resistance, and all of those conditions can independently heighten your inflammation, your hormonal imbalance, and your cancer risk. Can you guess the type of food you probably use to fight diabetes, all while it may be secretly feeding a tumor? I'll show you this food later in the video, but first it's time to discuss a cancer-causing food you may eat every day. Processed meats, breakfast and lunch carcinogens. Bacon, sausage, hot dogs, deli meats, so delicious, so convenient, so very bad for you and your cancer risk. Why? Deli meats contain large helpings of nitrates and nitrites, preservative agents that are strongly linked to an increased risk of several cancers, particularly colorectal cancer. Once inside the digestive system, they can become converted into carcinogenic compounds that damage DNA, promote mutations, and initiate tumor formation, especially in the colon and rectum. And of course, these foods are notorious for their high sodium, high saturated fat, and high omega-6 fat content, along with other highly inflammatory preservative agents. Having an inflammatory state in your body causes the release of cytokines and growth factors, which can stimulate tumor cell growth. Inflammatory foods like processed meats can also lead to tumor angiogenesis, a complex process that forms new blood vessels and supplies extra oxygen and nutrients to cancer cells. That's basically like adding fuel to a fire. In the end, the International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified processed meats as Group 1 carcinogens, the same category as tobacco and asbestos. But if you think you can escape this negative nutrition by switching to uncured meats, guess again. Even unprocessed red meat, especially grilled or charred, can become toxic to your body and raise your risk of tumor growth. On their own, red meats contain heme iron, the molecule in red meat that gives it that red color. But it is also pro-oxidative when overconsumed and can lead to the formation of dangerous reactive oxygen species. These free radicals damage DNA, inflame gut lining, and may lead to cancer-initiating mutations. But the real cancer risk comes from how your red meat is prepared. Research proves that cooking red meat at high temperatures imbues it with carcinogenic compounds. Red meat under extreme heat temperatures creates heterocyclic aromatic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and both are linked to DNA mutations and tumor formation. For diabetics, red meat also tends to worsen insulin sensitivity when eaten in excess. So, here's a smart swap. You don't have to forego your favorite red meat, but be sure to cook it gently. This means stop fire grilling or frying your meats over high heat. Instead, stew, steam, or bake red meats to cut down on their carcinogenic properties. Even better, try meatless meals at least 3 times per week. Alright, so there's another cooking method that can automatically increase your chances of DNA damage. I'll tell you what that is in just a sec, but first we need to talk about highly processed foods, the silent killers. Potato chips, frozen pizzas, microwave dinners, even most of those apparently healthy energy bars and breakfast bars. They all have several things in common, and it's these similarities that add to your cancer risk. Ultra-processed foods give you a quadruple whammy. They are high in added sugar, they are cooked in refined oils, they are loaded with artificial additives, and they are all critically lacking in fiber and micronutrients. A major 2023 study in the BMJ found that high consumption of ultra-processed foods was linked to a 29% higher risk of colorectal cancer in men. For diabetics, these foods drive both insulin resistance and obesity, 2 known cancer accelerators. Now, what is this so-called Warburg effect? Well, this is the basic principle that links your blood sugar to your cancer risk. All the way back in the 1920s, researcher Otto Warburg and his colleagues discovered that tumors eat far larger amounts of glucose than surrounding bodily tissues. Warburg also found that tumor cells tend to use different metabolic processes to convert glucose into usable energy than normal cells, and this process, called aerobic glycolysis, feeds extra glucose to cancer cells. This is the Warburg effect. It's why your blood sugar is closely linked to tumor growth, and it's a major reason to scale way back on sugar-filled processed foods. Okay, so what's this other popular cooking style that automatically supplies your body with cancer-growing anti-nutrition? Deep-fried foods, AGE accelerators. French fries, fried chicken, donuts. Classic and delicious? Absolutely. But toxic to your DNA? Well, they're that too. First off, highly processed, saturated fat-laden cooking oils used for deep frying contain toxic trans fats, which have been found to cause cellular instability and may increase the likelihood of cell mutations. Trans fats are also highly inflammatory to your system and can raise your risk of DNA damage and angiogenesis. They also worsen insulin resistance, potentially speeding the growth of malignant tumors. Plus, just like cooking red meat at high heats can be toxic, cooking carbohydrate-rich foods in the high temperatures of deep frying can create harmful compounds, especially acrylamide, a chemical classified as a Group 2A probable human carcinogen. But here's maybe the biggest cancer risk for deep frying: It also causes the creation of highly toxic advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. AGEs damage DNA, stiffen blood vessels, and trigger massive oxidative stress, a known driver of cancer and diabetic complications like retinopathy and neuropathy. Meanwhile, studies show that deep-fried foods can negatively affect the gut microbiome and potentially increase intestinal permeability, further raising the risk of colon and rectum cancers. It's especially important to avoid fast food deep-fried products because they are often cooked in reused oils, and that has been shown to increase the amount of oxidative stress you receive from that food. So here's another smart swap. Bake, air fry, or lightly sauté instead of deep frying, and use small amounts of pro-heart health avocado oil or olive oil. Next, beware of alcoholic drinks, the other liquid carcinogen. It is true that drinking a single glass of red wine a few times per week has been shown to supply cardioprotective properties, but even just one glass of wine can have hidden dangers. When metabolized, alcohol converts to acetaldehyde, a carcinogen that damages DNA, disrupts DNA repair, and promotes mutations in healthy cells. Alcohol also increases estrogen levels, raising the risk of hormone-driven cancers like breast cancer. Of course, alcoholic beverages are also typically high in carbohydrates and simple sugar content, so they can easily disrupt your blood sugar regulation and your insulin resistance. The American Cancer Society now recommends zero alcohol as the safest choice. There's one more drink that can mess with your cancer risk. I'll show it to you next. Now, let's take a close look at a type of packaged food product that could load you up on tumor-growing compounds, thanks to its packaging: BPA-lined canned foods. Canned soups, canned beans, canned vegetables. Convenient? Sure. But check the label. Does the can itself contain BPA? Bisphenol A is a synthetic estrogen and endocrine disruptor, meaning it can mimic specific hormones and may end up fueling hormone-sensitive cancers, especially breast and prostate cancers. And most cans are lined with epoxy resins containing BPA. This chemical can then leach into the food itself, especially for acidic products like canned tomatoes and long shelf-life canned products. But BPA is so harmful that even low-dose exposure has been shown to alter pancreatic beta cell function. That's real bad news, especially if you are insulin resistant. Research further suggests that diabetics exposed to BPA have heightened rates of insulin resistance and weight gain. Plus, be aware that many canned foods, even ones that are BPA-free, can still fuel potential tumors due to their inclusion of chemical preservatives, including those pesky nitrites and nitrates, along with sulfites. These chemicals will form carcinogenic nitrosamines inside the body and contribute to DNA damage in the digestive tract. That's why regularly utilizing canned foods can raise your risk of several forms of cancer, especially colorectal and stomach cancers. Now, you may already be using one type of food, thinking it can help you avoid blood sugar spikes. But as it turns out, this mysterious ingredient can actually heighten your insulin resistance and your risk of tumor growth. Stay tuned to learn which food I'm talking about. That's just ahead. But first, we really need to discuss another major form of food and drink that can raise your cancer risk: full-fat dairy products. Milk, cheese, butter, particularly from conventional hormone-treated cows, can be problematic. But even less treated dairy from lactating cows can still naturally contain estrogen and progesterone, as well as insulin-like growth factor 1, all of which promote cell growth. Now, while IGF-1 is important for growing children, for adults, chronically elevated IGF-1 levels inhibit the body's ability to kill cancer cells. It can also stimulate angiogenesis, potentially feeding more blood and oxygen to tumors. High IGF-1 can also supercharge your lipogenesis, or your body's natural fat production, and contribute to obesity, which itself is a major risk factor for cancer. But for diabetics and pre-diabetics, IGF-1 from dairy can really fan the flames. This hormone shares structural similarities to insulin, so it can interfere with normal insulin signaling and accelerate pancreatic beta cell burnout. And here's the real kicker: Dairy proteins, especially casein and whey, trigger the liver to synthesize more IGF-1. Of course, full-fat dairy also contains more animal fat, which can accumulate pesticide residues and other cancer-linked toxins. So, while some milks and certain cheeses, in moderation, do provide anti-diabetes benefits, it is really important that you work hard to cut back on your intake of dairy. We're almost done with today's list, but this isn't the end of the story. Stick around, because in just a minute, I'll break down the major takeaways from this topic. Alright, it's time to discuss the final major food type to avoid if you wish to reduce your risk of cancer, and this food is a major trickster. So watch out for artificial sweeteners, the fake friend. Sucralose, aspartame, saccharin, marketed to diabetics as sugar-free salvation. But are they safe? Not necessarily, and in fact, they can lead to excess insulin in your body. Here's the fake sugar paradox. These additives won't cause an immediate blood sugar spike, but they trick your brain into thinking that you are receiving sugar and therefore trigger an insulin response. That's why, over time, using too much fake sugar can still heighten your insulin resistance and fuel potential cancer growth. Worse still, as fake sugar is actually far sweeter in taste than real sugar, studies confirm that overconsuming artificially sweetened food and drinks can increase your sugar cravings, potentially sabotaging your glucose control and causing you to overeat other diabetes and cancer-increasing foods. Some research also shows that artificial sweeteners can disrupt gut microbiota, increasing inflammation and the potential for cancerous toxins to leak into the bloodstream. At the end of the day, daily consumption of artificially sweetened beverages has been linked to a greater risk of type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome, both of which are cancer risk factors. So you've made it this far. Thank you for watching. It's time to tell you the key cancers associated with high insulin and insulin resistance: breast, prostate, pancreatic, colorectal, endometrial, and liver cancer. So, having chronic high blood sugar and insulin resistance not only heightens your chances of developing cancer, it can also make it more difficult for your body to fight cancer cell growth. But here's the good news. You can fight diabetes and your cancer risk by cutting way back on all the food types in this video. And nutritional experts agree. If you regularly consume anti-inflammatory, pro-heart health, glucose-stabilizing foods, you can lower your cancer risk, improve your insulin sensitivity, and reclaim your energy and vitality. Check out the Diabetes Smarts video collection to get the inside scoop on our planet's best foods for your blood sugar.